There will be dozens of new faces on Capitol Hill next year when Congress convenes, including our next 4 guests, all incoming members of the House of Representatives, who each bring a unique perspective here to Washington. Democrat Joe Neguse is Colorado's first Black congressman. His parents came to this country from Eritrea as refugees more than 35 years ago. He's also a new father of a baby girl. Congrats on that. Democrat Deb Haaland of New Mexico is one of the first 2 Native American women elected to Congress. She's also a single mother. Republican Dan Crenshaw of Texas is a retired Navy SEAL who fought in Afghanistan. He may also be the first representative-elect to appear on Saturday Night Live, at least I remember. And Democrat Chrissy Houlahan of Pennsylvania is a former captain in the Air Force, a former chemistry teacher, and she is also a mother of 2. So you ladies know something about multitasking here. A lot of Americans, when you talk to them, seem to have lost faith in Congress. In fact, the approval rating CBS News just took was at 19%. What made you run?
You know, look, I was very concerned about the direction that our country was taking. As you mentioned, my parents were Eritrean immigrants to this country, and we've been able to live the American dream. And the freedoms and the opportunities that have enabled us to live the American dream in every sense of that phrase, I felt like we're slipping away for a lot of Americans in our country, and so decided that I would try to do something about it and threw my hat in the ring.
Congresswoman?
Yes, well,
Congresswoman-elect.
Thank you. Well, of course, this is an important job. It's an important job for my district in New Mexico. I wanted to feel like I could help more people. The Constituent Services Program that we're all responsible for, I think, is extremely important for our districts, and that's absolutely one of the reasons that I decided to run.
What about you, Congressman-elect?
Well, you know, I was in the military for 10 years. I took an oath to the Constitution 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that oath has not ended. So it's really about service. It's about service and it's about impact. You know, how can I impact the issues that matter to my constituents? You know, we're still reeling from Hurricane Harvey. We want more individual freedom. We want less government in our lives. We want to live that American dream. And those are things we can actually agree on. And that's what I'll be fighting for.
So when you hear that there's an approval rating of just 19%, you think you can do better than that?
Well, I hope so. Is that an improvement? Or it might be an improvement. I thought it was lower at one point.
Yeah.
I understand that's the case. And you know, the military has long brought a lot of credibility to American institutions. I hope to bring some of that credibility to Congress. You know, the way we do that is we talk to each other like we're actually people. Let's not attack each other's intent. Let's not attack each other as a person. Let's attack ideas. All right, we can debate ideas. We can disagree on ideas all day long. Let's find the things that we actually agree upon and work on those.
Are you equally as optimistic, Congresswoman-elect?
Well, so I share a lot of commonalities with my fellow colleagues in terms of why I'm running. I'm 3rd-generation military. My dad and grandfather served careers, and I did as well. Served as a captain in the Air Force. And as a 3rd-generation military member, I am deeply concerned about the democracy right now. I'm worried about the direction that we're heading as a people. I'm similarly interested in making sure that we maintain civility and decency with one another in the way that we treat each other and the way that our government works. And personally, my motivation for running is one of service. I want to continue the service that I've done both in the military and also growing good and strong businesses, and most recently in education as a teacher and also as a nonprofit leader in early childhood literacy.
The district that you were elected in, you flipped it.
Yes.
Red to blue.
Yes.
But you've described it as more purple.
Yes.
It's a mix of people of different convictions here. How do you balance those forces? And does that mean that, as a Democrat, you're willing to work with President Trump?
Absolutely. We are a district that's 40% Democrat, 40% Republican, and 20% independent. And I call us purple people because I believe that we are. I believe largely that we sit in the middle, and what we're looking for is head and heart issues.
One of the more divisive issues is immigration. It's also what President Trump says he wants to tackle. Obviously, there are different views on how to do that. But Congresswoman-elect, you're in a very unique position as one of only 2 Native American women elected to Congress. How do you think that affects your approach on things like immigration?
Sure. Well, New Mexico's a border state, so we actually feel confident about the security of our borders in New Mexico. New Mexico as a whole was appalled when the policy to separate children from their parents happened on the border. It made me immediately think about governmental policies back when my grandmother was a child and she was separated from her family and taken to Indian boarding school. So it seems like at some point we need to look at our history and stop doing the things that are harmful to our children and work toward finding solutions that are absolutely humane.
You would work with President Trump.
Well, I think we all have to do it together. The Democrats won back the House. We didn't win back the Senate or the presidency yet. So we do have to work across the aisle to make sure that we can get things passed, yes.
Congressman-elect, you are a vet. You mentioned your service. How do you feel about the deployment of U.S. troops, U.S. personnel to the border? Is that the right way to be using the U.S. military?
Well, what they're using them for is logistical support. You know, they're not down there as combat troops stopping people from crossing the border.
They're not actually at the border.
That's not what's actually happening.
Right.
What's actually happening is they're reinforcing the law enforcement that is there to do their job. You know, the reality is the question I always have the Democrats is, do we agree that our border should be secure? Yes or no? I understand you don't like the wall. I understand that. But can we agree that the border should be secured? And if you have other ideas to secure that border, and especially in Texas, we are willing to listen because, I mean, we have a river along the border. We can't always put a wall there. We get that. You know, we've got other options as well. So will you work with us?
But in terms of using the U.S. military in that role, essentially, you know, we have a border patrol that has the job that you just laid out, that the military is now there.
Well, right, but there was also thousands and thousands of people coming up to the border in a caravan, and so you have to take different measures to do that. So
you do see that as a threat, even though they're on foot and not at the border yet.
Well, what's the other option? To just let them cross? Because we don't have enough law enforcement officials to deal with that possibly. So, you know, again, we're not putting combat troops on the border. That's not what's happening. We are dealing with this in a very humane way, and as I think we should, and we can all agree on that for sure. None of us really like seeing families separated. I've said that all along. That's the last thing we want to see. Republicans tried to put legislation forward that would stop that, okay? And we would continue to do that. But yes, if it's between letting people across and not letting people across, we have to secure our border. And I hear that we agree on that a lot. I do. And I understand the Democrats don't like the rhetoric and we don't like the wall. I absolutely get that. But I want to see other options on the table then and what we can do to actually secure it.
He's comfortable with using U.S. troops in that way. Are you?
No, I think it's the wrong approach. I think it's imprudent. I disagree with it. And I think the other option is to follow existing law and let folks go through the asylum process, and to the extent that they are able to successfully claim asylum. I say this as the son of refugees. I mean, I think immigrants to this country have so much to give, and it's important we get this right.
Will the Democrats at the table vote for any kind of immigration reform that includes funding for a border wall?
I wouldn't.
No, I don't support a wall.
I wouldn't as well. And I'm also the daughter of a refugee. My dad was a survivor of the Holocaust and came here with his mom as a very small child, as a 5-year-old. And this is a very personal issue to me.
Let me take a break here and come back. We talked about finding agreement. We've already found a disagreement. Let's see what else we can get to. Got there pretty quick. After this short break, we will be back in a moment with more from our panel. We're back with our new member panel, and let's pick up the conversation. I know the two of you, both vets, have made a vow to try to find at least one point of agreement that you can legislate around. Do you know what that's going to be?
I think there's multiple points.
Yep.
So, I mean, opioids,
Yep.
infrastructure issues. You know, we have different infrastructure issues around the country, but for us, it's flood mitigation. Opioid epidemic is terrible. More people died of opioids last year than the entire Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. That's just the reality. Mm-hmm. And
but is there anything that you particularly want to shepherd here?
Well, I agree. Infrastructure and a big infrastructure bill, absolutely. Opioids is an enormous problem in our community as well. Pharmaceutical prescription prices, I think, is something that we need to look at. We have to look at.
And another thing I would bring up is workforce training issues. You know, there's 7 million job openings, which is a great problem to have. We've got a great economy, but we need middle skill labor to fill those jobs.
I want to ask the Democrats at the table about your own leadership, your own party identity. I know you, Congresswoman-elect, have said you will support Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker.
Yes.
The two of you, did you learn anything this week? Did she earn your votes and your support?
Well, so I'd say I just want one quick tangent. Criminal justice reform is also
you're deflecting.
another. No, I will answer. I will answer the question. But it's a really
yes,
important
yes.
issue where there's some emerging bipartisan consensus from Republicans and Democrats.
I think
so
that's great.
I'm passionate about that. No, look, it's fascinating to me that it's the question that we got most often, at least the Democrats did, here during orientation, which is particularly interesting since there's no other candidate that I'm aware of that's running against Leader Pelosi. I intend to support her. I think that it's important that we have steady leadership right now. And I found it pretty heartening over the course of the last week, some of the developments around it becoming clear that this leadership team is going to work to try to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table. You saw a message from Leader Pelosi's office by way of example around making sure that there is progressive representation on key committees in the Congress, and the Congressional Progressive Caucus leaders endorsing her shortly thereafter. So yeah, that's where I am.
Is that what changed your mind, the pledge to a diversity council?
That, among many other things, I wanted to have conversations with the existing leadership and also with my fellow freshmen, fellow classmates, to talk to them about their vision for the caucus, their vision for the future, and ultimately that's where I landed.
Do you know how you'll vote yet?
Right now, she's the only person who's running, so it would appear as though that's where my vote would go. And right now, I believe that she's an effective person in that job. And so,
But you're open to being swayed?
I believe right now it looks as though it's heading in the direction that she will be our speaker. And I think she's a pretty powerful person and capable person.
Congressman-elect, you, during your run, were backed by Bernie Sanders. Do you think he represents the future of your party?
I think we're a big tent party. I mean, if
Well, he's a more progressive voice within it.
Of course, and there are also many other voices, and many of our freshmen that we spent this week with come from different areas of the country, different regions of the country. Obviously, I am a progressive Democrat and believe that we should be bold in pushing for some really comprehensive solutions around some of the pressing public policy challenges that we face, climate change and the planetary crisis being the best example, perhaps. But look, again, we are a big tent party. We are inclusive. We are diverse. I think that's a good thing. So I appreciate his voice, just as I do the voice of many, many other leaders in the party who are all stepping up to the plate at a really critical time for our democracy.
But Republicans learned this when they had sort of an insurgent group, the Tea Party, right? That it can, while being part of a bigger tent, cause problems for leadership, or at least, try to create some issues around finding consensus. Do you see that happening for Democrats? Do progressives now become the problem for Nancy Pelosi rather than part of the caucus really on the same page?
No, I don't think that's the case. I've only been in Washington for 5 days, so but my experience thus far, and I think Deb can touch on this as well as a member of the Progressive Caucus, but no, I don't think that's the case. I think we are all working together, rowing in the same direction, trying to save our democracy, to be frank. And so,
why do you say save our democracy?
Well, look, I think that right now it's important for this majority in the House to engage in some really critical oversight of an administration that is undermining a lot of critical freedoms for folks in our country. And so when I say save our democracy, I mean precisely that I think some of our democratic freedoms and the principles that we live by have been under attack for the better part of the last 2 years.
Congressman-elect, do you want to respond to that, since the president is the leader of your party?
Yeah. Well, I always ask the question, like what? What is he undermining exactly? What democratic freedoms have been undermined? We just had an election where we switched power in the House. Democracy is at work. People are voting in record numbers. I always ask for examples, and then we can hit those examples one by one. And if it's worth criticizing, it's worth criticizing. But just kind of this broad brush criticism that the president is somehow undermining our democracy, I always wonder what exactly we're talking about.
I'll be happy to add all of the things that
I'm happy to give an example as well. I mean, the undermining of the freedom
the free
of
press,
right.
Judiciary, CIA, FBI, the voting process.
By way of example,
Obama indicted, had many press members under investigation. Trump has not.
That's true.
So just this
what
last
is the difference
this
here?
last week, one of the largest media publications in the United States, right, had to go to a federal court in order to essentially regain access
that was
to
for
the
one
press
reporter.
room.
One reporter, not the whole
organizations,
organization.
including CBS, did file amicus briefs in support.
Yeah. So I mean, again, I think it's part of a much larger
because he was disruptive.
But, well, again,
I would argue that our president is
disagreed,
consistently disruptive in those very same press conferences, and I would argue that he treats
how is that an
disrespect.
attack on the press, though?
Because it's literally an attack on the press.
I've literally been attacked, so let's choose our words carefully.
His language is an attack.
Okay, so why can't he speak? Why is he not allowed to use his own language and freedom of speech?
Because you talked about this actually. It's important that we lead from example, that we lead from the top, and the way that our president is currently
I agree with you there. I agree with you there. Style is one thing. If you want to criticize style, I'm with you, right? But to say it's an attack on the freedom of the press, that is a very bold statement.
By calling the press the enemy of the people,
yeah, I don't like that language.
That is literally.
Okay, so the style, I agree. I don't like that language.
And fake news, of course. Yes. And I'll give you another example. His rhetoric about erasing trans people in our country. That,
and he's never
to
said
me,
that.
well, it appears that he is discriminating against the LGBTQ community. And I think that's troublesome. I think it's worrisome. We all have communities across this country. And and we mentioned it at the beginning, ripping children away from their parents' arms. Those are all things that worry me, that I absolutely feel that we have to have oversight on.
Or how about just,
So
maligning the CIA and the FBI and the State Department and all those important institutions that are fundamental to how our democracy works.
What I hear a lot is you don't like what he says, and sometimes, okay, but and you don't like we have policy disagreements, but you're saying undermining democracy.
And I am.
And I want to caution us because those are very bold words. If we have policy disagreements, let's focus on those policy disagreements, and I'll be happy to discuss those at any point. But this is what I've been getting at kind of all week, which is we tend to go right at the jugular, right? We say you're undermining democracy, you're a bad person fundamentally. That's not always true. We have policy disagreements on a lot of these things.
I think it's interesting that we talked about some of the most divisive issues, including immigration, but the thing that set all of you off was the president. We have to leave the conversation there. Thank you so much. Good luck to you in your new work, in your new jobs, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.